Hello and welcome to the Ascension series. In this video series, I'm going to be talking about how to grow your wealth. Now, I think a lot of times people think about wealth as money and having a lot of it, but I think there's three parts to it: how to get it, how to grow it, and how to spend it. Like sometimes people are all caught up on getting a higher rate of return or investing in crazy things like crypto or thinking they're going to go down to the casino and double their money. But effectively, there's getting it, growing it, and spending it. Now, when I say spending, it's generally because a lot of entrepreneurs who have grown their business and have gotten some revenues, they get well to do, they get well off, they have an exit, they make some money, and then what? You've been eating beans on toast and really roughing it for a long time, and all of a sudden you get this flood of money. And the worst thing you can go and do is just to go and blow it all on stupid things. Or perhaps you don't get a big flood of money. Maybe you just get a little bit of money, and then as soon as you get it, you spend it on something. You bought a car, you bought a boat, you bought something else. And there are times and there are reasons why you would spend certain money that may seem counterintuitive to some people. But there is a way to do it more effectively, and that is to spend in a way that builds your status and it creates more of an investment for you. So being an entrepreneur and building a whole bunch of wealth and then squandering it all doesn't get you anything. But being strategic about the way that you spend your money can help position you so that you are seen very effectively or very positively as someone who makes things happen and can grow things. So rather than spending all of your money on things that no one's going to see the value of, why not set yourself up in a position where you can be seen as someone who is valuable in other ways, in post the life of your business, post the life of whatever your investment was that went really well, you can then be looked favorably upon for other opportunities. So ultimately, the goal is to never go hungry. You never want to go backwards below a certain point. Business is a wild ride. You've got lots of ups, you've got lots of downs, and everything in between. But ultimately, you have the ability to fix your standard of living at a particular level. And once you do that, yes, business may go up significantly, but even if it goes down, you'll never fall below a certain standard of living. If you do things like structuring and things like that, and maybe some of it is to do with your own finances, but then some of it is also to do with public perception of who you are and the value you bring to the marketplace. So in this series of videos, we're going to go through, like I said, how to get it, how to grow it, and how to spend it. So at the start, we're going to look at really what is wealth, what is growing your financial literacy. This is not advice, this is financial education. If you need to go and get specific advice, then you need to do so with someone who's in your area that knows your local laws, that knows all the things that you have to be compliant with, or the opportunities that are relevant to you. Everyone's circumstances are slightly different. Everyone's family situations are different. Everyone's environment around them, like the legal possibilities. And things I say today may change in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 6 months. You don't know. So what I hope to give is the financial literacy for you to make better decisions, to help you go faster, to help you reduce your risks, and just how you should really think about wealth, growing it, keeping it, and using it or spending it. So in terms of money, now I've spoken to millionaires, billionaires, and a lot of the time really comes down to a very different approach of what money is and what it does and why it's valuable. Money is a tool, it is not everything. Wealth is asset value and accumulation of things that can generate income. And you can have wealth but be broke, basically. Let's just say you buy $1 million worth of gold. You can't eat it. It's probably a little bit hard to spend. You can't take it down the shop and buy something with it. But if you put all that money in gold, if you, at the time of recording, if you had done that 2 years ago, you would have more than doubled the value, or tripled, depending on how you got in, the value of your money in gold in the last few years. Having an investment that grows in value, but you need to remember that the scoreboard changes. The value of money changes. So if something didn't accumulate or decrease in value, let's just take a particular object, maybe a special type of mineral rock or something like that, and you bought a kilo of it. If it neither increased in value or decreased in value, the dollar amount of that rock would still change. It would go up over time because of inflation. The value of the paper money that is being traded decreases over time. So you need to think about the investment and the money that you have. Ideally, it is growing faster than inflation. So quite often, cash in a savings account growing at 2% a year is bad, particularly if inflation is at 3 or 3.5% a year. Technically, you're losing 0.5% to 1% per year. So this can happen wildly different. Like inflation is 16, 17, 18, 20% in some countries. So you need to understand the value of something and understand the desire and the need for that thing. And sometimes investments can be gold, they can be shares. And in particular, the case of crypto, it's not either of those things. It's a ones and zeros, it's code. But the perceived value of it is what drives it up or down. The fact that people feel like there is a limited number of it and they will keep buying more. And that is what generates the value in that item. Now, I'm not suggesting crypto. In fact, personally, I don't like crypto at all. However, it's important to talk about all of these things so that you know what you should and should not do. One other thing I want to talk about is risk. What is your risk profile? Ideally, you're building wealth. You're not trying to get lucky. So we don't want to be talking about high risk returns, really trying to get some crazy number, because you may as well go bet on the horses or bet at the casino. And even if you went to the roulette table and the options are black or red, okay, it's still not 50-50 because you have the option to get a single zero or a double zero. And of course, your chances of losing are far greater than your chances of winning. So it's not really a investment at that point, it's a gamble. And so I think when investing, you need to think that way, that the money should do better over time, and no, not so bright and stellar that it completely blows the market. And there is a place to do that investing as part of a broader portfolio, but it is not a part of your base level of investment. You don't bet everything on, you don't bet sheep stations, you don't bet the house, you don't bet, your life savings on one thing. You should be trying to balance risk with safety and reward in an even way so that you can earn money that is a better return than inflation and perhaps a little better than a few of the ultra safe methods. And you know what, when you're young, it's okay to do things that are a little bit riskier. And as you get older, you want to reduce that risk level. So for example, in Australia, you have super funds and you can pick an investment scheme. You definitely should take the high risk early on because the swings of high to low are quite violent. But when you are constantly investing, you're buying at those low points as well as those medium and those high points. So on average, your average purchase cost is better. So you can afford to be high risk when you're young. And as you start to get older, you want to start to slowly reduce that risk until you get to the point of retirement. So you might try to time the market, then go to medium growth. Then you might want to go to low safe growth. Then you might go to bonds and eventually to cash. And that just reduces your risk, and the volatility in that money reduces significantly over time. The other thing is no one can predict things like 9/11, COVID, or wars between countries. These things happen. These things affect the market. But whilst the market may go down dramatically, thinking about the type of business that is underlying, perhaps if you're buying shares, what it is you're investing in. If you're perhaps in those times investing in things like masks, gloves, that would have been an amazing investment around just before or as soon as it started, if you could predict what was going to happen next. So you need to understand how human behavior works, how history is a great teacher, how things happen, how things have happened in the past, and how things are likely to happen in the future. Doesn't give you a crystal ball completely, but it will give you an indication on what the market is likely to do. So let's just say you pick a safe stock, maybe a bank or a major institution, and then you invest in that. And then when it goes down, if you're confident that it's going to survive, you can continue investing in that particular stock. However, there is a play, or there is a concept around investing in individual stocks versus the whole of market. So you ideally would not be picking stocks, because you may as well, again, in the casino example, you're putting it on number 23, spinning the wheel and hoping it lands. Individual stocks are a risk. And it's been proven statistically for many years in a row that the market as a whole is very hard to beat. It's almost impossible for any one person to trade the right thing on the right day to beat the market average. So you can invest in the market average. You can get what's called an exchange traded fund, an ETF, and it aggregates and brings together all of the shares and gives you the average value as it goes up and down together. You might have some that outperform everything else. Amazing. You were never going to pick that. You were never going to buy it at the right time. You absolutely have no idea how to do that, because you don't know what's going on in the company. There's too many moving parts. There's external stakeholders. If you did that, it's pretty much sheer luck. And anyone that tells you different is lying or has an insane skill that no one else can replicate. The other one is a smaller group of the exchange traded fund. For example, it's not the whole market, but it might be the top 200, or it might be all the tech stocks, or it might be all the real estate stocks. All of those funds, all of those investment methodologies are a way to de-risk. And I know I've talked a lot about the stock market. And there are other things. Anything that's traded may not be a stock. It might be a commodity. We're talking corn. We're talking iron, cotton, all sorts of things that are traded. That value, that the marketplace. Then there are physical assets. Maybe it's a house or gold or something like that. Then there are other asset classes, which are goods, if you will. Now, I will put cars in that category because there was a time when it was really hard to get new cars, and all the secondhand cars went up in value. So sometimes the concept of a brand new car is not always easy to obtain. Sometimes there was an issue where supply chain issues prevented the cars getting manufactured in time, and delivery timelines were 12 months to 18 months to 2 years. And so people would just start trading secondhand cars, and the value of secondhand cars went up astronomically. So it's not necessarily that you can make money on a secondhand car. If you time the market, maybe. If you have the right type of car, maybe not a crappy Honda Civic, but maybe if you had a Porsche or something reliable, or that people know, that is recognized, that is desirable. I had a conversation between a dentist who had a Mercedes G-Wagon and went to go buy the thing, and as soon as he signed the paperwork and got the keys, someone else walked into the dealership and said, "I'll give you another 50 grand on top for whatever you paid." He handed the keys right over and then and there. Basically, he bought a car for himself and made 50 grand within an hour. So that's the kind of thing that can happen when you have a supply and demand. And that's part of building the income side and a little bit of the wealth side. I think what I mean by wealth side is really just getting a lot more of the money to grow itself, or the money to grow behind the scenes. Ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur and you're running a business, you don't want to be monitoring your bank accounts, your income statements, your valuations on an hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute basis. You don't have the time for that. You don't want to be doing on a day-to-day, probably not even week-to-week. I would say you need to get into the mind frame that you're going to make smart, good quality, long-term decisions. You're going to take a holistic view. You're going to slow down. You're going to take a step back. If you get caught in the minutia, you get caught up in the market and in the hype. And everybody's panicking, sell, sell. Everybody's buying, buy. But both of those times are the wrong time to do it. When everybody's selling, that's when you buy. When everybody's buying, that's when you sell. And markets panic. Look at the last few major hiccups in history, and the share market has tanked. But it's only been there for a few weeks or a few months, and it's come right back up again. And that might take a week, it might take a year, it might take 5 years. But there's a saying of buy when there's blood on the streets. The idea is buy low, sell high. If you think overall that business, that asset is going to go up in value, buy at a point when people are panicking and all over the place. And you want to be in a position where you have that power. And in order to have that power, you need something called liquidity. Liquidity is the ability to turn money into cash so you're not tied up in this asset or that asset, so you're not stuck. And one way to make sure that you do that is to somewhat diversify your stocks and assets and things like that. So maybe when property is down but share market is up, you might be able to sell shares, buy property, and then when property's up and share market's down, you could sell property and buy shares. Now, there are transaction costs, there are fees and levies and taxes and incentives not to do that, and there is capital gains tax as well. But the concept is the same. You might do it between two asset classes. You might say, keep an amount of money in a safe area that is not highly volatile, or maybe if it's in the stock market, it is quickly liquidable. So if you really needed cash to pounce on an opportunity, let's say you see another business that is up for a liquidation sale and everything is going for 10 cents in the dollar. That means that if you went to buy those assets yourself, you would pay $100. But because they're on a fire sale because of the liquidation, they're available for $10. That means that if you had $10 available, let's add a few zeros to make it realistic. Let's say the business was going bust, but if you had to buy everything from scratch, it was going to cost $1 million, but you could never afford that. If the business was under liquidation and everything was available for sale for 10 cents in the dollar, that means that the $1 million assets of that company are now $100,000. If you have $100,000 available to you, you get a 90% discount. Is it worth it? If you can make money on those assets and use them in your business and turn them into cash, yes, absolutely. If your money was tied up in property and other things that take maybe like long-term deposits with penalties and all that sort of stuff, where you had no ability to turn it into cash within, say, a week, then you would be stuck in that investment position and you would not be able to pounce on this rare opportunity. So the example of liquidity says that you should have some amount of money in an asset class that you can quickly liquidate. It could be a term deposit, it could be shares, could be gold, as long as there is a buyer in the market, that you could turn that into cash, make that transaction, and then use that transaction as a way to gain additional wealth. So buy low, sell high works. Sometimes just having cash on hand can save you a lot of money. And that might be the fact that you buy the annual subscription instead of the month to month, which means you get a 20% discount. And it might mean that you can negotiate something. Let's just say you were able to buy property and you paid a bigger deposit, and so they will let you have a lower overall purchase price. Or you're about to buy, let's say you've got to rent a car or something, and you say, I'll pay everything right now for a 6-month lease or something like that, and they'll give you a 20% discount. There is value in that. Everybody tries to make more, but they don't always look at how to spend less. Every dollar saved is a dollar earned. So you need to look at both sides of the equation when you're trying to increase the income side of the equation. That's how much is coming in. The wealth side is finding things that grow in value. And things that grow in value are assets like shares, property, and things that are non-depreciating assets. So buying a car typically is a depreciating asset. Buying a piece of machinery for your workshop is a depreciating asset. It goes down in value over time. So you need to think about how you can use your money so that when it is parked away and you're not thinking about it and you're not using it, that it is growing in value so that when you come back, or maybe it's building an income for you, so shares have a dividend, or if it's growing in value so that when you sell it, then you can realize that cash to use for something else. That might be something that you then go and buy another asset with. Might be something you go on a holiday with. But ultimately, you need a lot more than you think you do. You want your money creating money for you. In today's money, if you have $2 million, you're probably going to get about 4 or 5 grand a month in residual income through dividends or interest, or depending on what the percentage is, that would be feasible and you would have an income. So the idea of building that income, ideally, you want to be spending the interest and not the capital. What's the difference between interest and capital? Capital is the money that you put forward It's the one that you have earned, you have got, it's in your savings account, it's money or wealth that you have right now. That's your capital. The interest is what is earned on that capital. So if I put it in a long-term deposit and I'm making 5% interest on it, all of that 5% interest is my interest, right? So it's the income that I've earned on my money, on my capital. But if you go and spend your capital, there are plenty of cases where people have won millions of dollars and they buy boats, cars, jet skis, holidays, do stupid things with it. And very quickly, they're broke again. There's no final hurrah, go off into the sunset. However, those that took that base capital and did nothing but invest it and then only lived off the income, let's just say they won $2 million. Now they can live comfortable life on $5,000 a month, for example, and don't need to work anymore. Are they rich? Not really. They're not like screw the world, run away, do whatever you like, rich. They are rich enough to not have to work. So if you were to build that same value and invest that interest back into it, your wealth would grow significantly, exponentially so, because you're constantly buying more wealth. And if you continue to contribute to it, if you had, say, $5 million, then yes, you would have enough to live quite a comfortable life and be able to not have to work and be able to, maybe you and your partner could retire. Maybe it's 10 million. But again, your standard of living will probably increase. And you can almost infinitely scale your cost of living because you might decide to buy the more expensive bread, the more expensive milk, the more expensive, I don't know, drinks when you go out for a dinner, your more expensive dinners. Everything can become infinitely more expensive. Then you start buying services. Then you start buying endless things that you don't need. So you need to be careful and really be disciplined if you want to grow your wealth. Anyone can make more money. You get a new skill, you get a new job, and I know that sounds ignorant, but it's not. You can do more with a bit of hard work to get more income. But what you then do with that income, like people get pay rises and then, 6 months later, they're asking for another pay rise because they've not been intelligent with it. They've just spent more. So if you can flip that thinking, set a standard of living and say, I'm going to stick within this, eventually that upline, that top side, that capital will grow to a point where that income is so much that you could easily, comfortably increase your standard of living. But if you go too far, now you're eating into the capital and you're reducing your ability for your money to make you money. So be clever, be frugal, start building things that return investment on themselves, and you will end up with more money. Then when you spend the money, again, this is how to spend the money, you will be able to make decisions that help you to get more money, whether that is positioning you. For example, maybe joining a golf club where you hang out with more high-end entrepreneurs so you get more higher level opportunities that you would never have gotten before. Maybe you dress a bit better and so people give you better opportunities. But again, you've not done it because you're buying the very expensive toilet paper and that's a benefit that no one is going to see, but you're doing something that is going to create a perception of status, a perception of quality, reliability, trust, and that is what helps you build more of that non-financial wealth, that trust, that credibility, that positioning, that power, that outward perception that you know what you're doing. And so framing it that way is going to really help you to make a much better decision on what you spend your money on. Am I going to spend it on I'm going to have 28 ply toilet paper instead of 2 ply? It costs 5 times more. I'm not saying, obviously, there's no such thing as that. If you buy toilet paper that costs 5 times more just because you can, is it really a win? Probably not. If it was something that, like, you worked hard and you really wanted it to be comfortable when you went to the loo, then fine, do that. But pick 10 other things to stay disciplined on. Pick a whole bunch of other things to stay disciplined on. You can have your little, we'll concede on this or we'll concede on that. You might never want to fly coach again, whatever, it's up to you. But it's an opportunity cost. It's a trade-off. That money could have been invested to get you much more. And then maybe someday you can buy your own plane or something like that. Anyway, extreme examples here, but you understand what I mean. So instead of getting the fancy things, think first, how can I build revenue? Think, how can I build positioning? Think, how can I build an ability to generate more income because I'm using my income to not only invest in the wealth that comes through money and assets, but the wealth that comes through me or you. You need to be able to put that together in such a way that, like, if I had that extra money and I went and paid for a service, and that service freed me up for an extra 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week, that's more time that I can spend going and connecting with people and building more wealth and building more value for myself. So if that's what you have the ability to do, then you should absolutely spend money on those sorts of things. But if it's something that is totally pointless, no one's going to see, it's a senseless spend, it's just not worth it. Now, we've all heard the story of the tortoise and the hare. The hare goes really fast, runs out of puff, and in the end of the day, the tortoise is slow, steady, does the next thing and the next thing, and they win the race. So investing is almost the same, where you've got your high flyers. And there's a quote from a movie where the star that burns twice as bright burns half as long. So if you get this wild, crazy investment, it might go absolutely awesome, but then completely tank. Now, like I said, there is a place for an investment portfolio where you can have some high risk shares. I've also invested in things that have gone up 400%, and then I've sold, and then a week later it completely crashed. Some of that is luck, some of that was intelligence, but at the end of the day, you cannot always be very clear on when that's going to happen. So you might invest in 100 things, one goes really well, the rest go completely bust, and you've still lost money overall. Investing is a long-term game. You need to set a strategy, a direction, and follow it. Stick to it. Every time you chop and change, you end up losing money in costs. You end up losing money in fees, charges, and taxes. So you need to pick a position and go with it. If you think it's not working, get some independent advice. Get somebody else to give you a sense check, because sometimes the market sounds horrible. The worst thing you can do is go and look at the financial news every single day. I would do it once a month, maybe once a quarter. Have enough of an idea of the direction, understand the global events, but don't get caught up in the hype, because the marketing, and in particular this day and age where algorithms show you what you want to see, and it makes you view longer. So of course they're going to send you things that give you that emotive response of, oh, this and then that, and then this share's doing terrible, or this company's going bust, or you hear this scandal. Who cares? It's just noise. Unless you're trading down to the hour, it is not important. What is more important is understand the long-term value of the company, understand the long-term value of the asset, and invest with a measured degree of caution and safety. Don't be high risk, emotively driven. It is not the way to run an investment. If we think about average dollar returns, right, yes, the markets go up and down, but we keep investing on average. And because we buy things when things are low, we might buy things when things are high, on average, we hit somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit lower, because hopefully when it is lower than what our purchase price was, if we believe in the share, if we believe in the asset, we can buy more of it. And then ultimately over time, when the market's craziness sorts itself out, we can sell. At the time when we're about to sell, you might want to wait and look for the peak of the market. At that point, yes, you would look at it a little bit closer. But for the most part, you should ideally want to set and forget investment, because then you can let it tick over. You can also reduce all of your time spent looking and focusing on that one particular thing, and just spend more time focusing on what's going to make you money, like in running your business, living your life, enjoying things. getting back to the conversation where we need to look at how much we gain versus how much we save. Sometimes you have to look at your whole system, your whole financial system. So you might have credit cards, you might have loans, you might have money that is you're paying for, but using it in an effective way. So you need to look at your overall capital structure. Are you paying loans? If you are, which one is cheaper? What are the terms? If you break out of it, is it going to cost you a lot? And ultimately, you're playing a game of inches, right? If you can pay out a loan that's costing you 20%, but you take out another loan that costs you 10%, you're actually in a better position. Now, you have to take into consideration fees, and there's some more detail in that. But broadly, if I'm paying a loan at 10% versus a loan at 20%, the 20% one's going to cost me a lot more in interest. So, yes, I might be able to use that as a tax deduction, but if I'm paying interest, it's cost, it's money flowing out. So I may as well get the 10% loan and pay off the 20% loan. Now I only have a 10% loan, and hopefully I can pay that off as well. And ultimately, you want to try and pay down debt relatively quickly. Yes, sometimes debt is good, but let's not get too wrapped around the axles on certain things. What we want to do is get a overall money strategy where, sometimes we'll take on debt because it's at 2 or 3%, but then use it to grow the business at 10 or 20%. So the difference between the two is much higher. But again, we're talking about risk. We don't want to be leveraged to the eyeballs. At the moment you're borrowing 90% of your capacity to borrow, 100% of your capacity to borrow, now you have a very high risk. If anything goes wrong, if anything goes backwards, and it quite often does, you could then be broke. You are now illiquid and you lose money. So what you're much better doing is looking at the whole picture. There might be times when you do borrow a small amount to achieve something. Ultimately, you want a lower interest rate, you want lower risk, you want easier terms, more flexibility to get out of things. And ultimately, if the investment, like if you're going to invest in something, if it has a low risk or a low opportunity risk of going up, then that's probably not worth a several percentage interest rate, which is a fixed cost. It's not that the interest rate doesn't go up and down with the principal, but it means that it's the same money no matter what. Whereas if you went and invested in something and this month it makes nothing, the next month it makes you 10 grand, the month after that it makes you nothing or loses you 5 grand, that is risky. You need something stable to invest in. You can't go borrow stable money and then invest it in something completely volatile. So you need to be a little bit more clever about your risk profiles and what you're doing there. So if you need to build a strategy what you should be doing is writing down a plan. So start writing a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year goal and understand what it is that you are trying to work towards. Then, once you've done that, obviously start writing where you're at today and where you want to be. Then reverse engineer what's going to take to get to that point. You need to be realistic. We can't say I'm going to be on a $100 million yacht if you're only earning $3,000 a week or $2,000 a week in a menial job. You need to be very clever about how you invest your money and where you spend your money. There's a principle of, I believe it's called Parkinson's law. If you have a certain amount of time to do a task, the task, no matter what you try to do, will take that time. Now, it's almost like with your income and your wages and your expenses, that if you have a certain amount of money to spend, you're going to end up spending that amount of money. So you need discipline. You need to say, I need to go and do this investment. So I'm going to take that money out and I'm going to push it out before anything else happens. Anyway, I hope this helps. There's going to be a lot more in these sessions and you're going to learn a lot more about financial planning. But for now, build your 10-year plan, build your goals, what it is that you want, and we're going to work towards getting that. So thank you for watching. See you in the next one.